Our next speaker is Rossella Vasta, who is an artist and author at the Pieve International School in Corciano, Perugia, Italy. Rossella told me that she wakes up every day wondering and thinking about what to eat today. Those of us in nutrition can associate with that. And also she said that when we think of old in the United States, we think of 10 to 15 years ago. In Italy, they think of pre-Roman times, 5th century BC. That's old. We take our nutrition students and other health students to Italy for study abroad, and we stay at Rossella's school. And so we're looking forward to the next group of students, which will be going in May. And I see in the audience we have some students who went last year and the year before. So we're looking forward to hearing from Rossella about her discussion.
Thank you very much. I gave this title, Italian Culture, Food, Wine and Colors, so that I can wear different hats that I wear for all the things that I do. First of all, I am an artist, and I have a degree in philosophy, and I've always been interested in food, as food is not only the physical experience, but is also an interesting intellectual experience. Coming from Italy, for us, food is part of our life, and it's true. I like to live in a country where every morning a mom wake up thinking, what we gonna eat today? And still nowadays, it's like that. Also, another funny thing is that you go on a bus in Italy and then you will see a young man calling mom and saying, "Mamma, I'm coming, butta giù la pasta," boil the pasta. So thinking of that, but our, culture of food, it's also very close to a very artistic way of being. And being an artist, I also do ceramics. And I come from an area which is Perugia, which is the core, it's called the green core of Italy, which is between Rome and Florence. It is also very famous for the ceramic production. The Ruta started doing ceramics since the year 1000 and they never stopped. So being an artist, of course, I've been exposed to the ceramics, and when you think of food, well, you think also of how that you use for your food. And so table setting, for us as Italian, is not less important than the preparation of the food, the preparation of the table. We really take a lot of care in the preparation of the table. So here, this year, I started also do a series of dishes that are called Waves of Grace, because I use the Chinese icon of grace for these paintings, and also because the waves that are from the kiln and to the oven have to go to the table to create a different kind of health, which is well-being, which is part and not less most important part of our table. And I enjoyed myself to create not only the ceramics but also the meal that to go with the ceramics. As in Italy nowadays, we have a lot of creativity in creating meal, which comes from reinventing the tradition. So here are some of the photos of the meals that I've created and the dishes that I've been using to put on that, Among the dishes that I've created, there are a lot of things that also inspired to American culture, like I've made my version of Thanksgiving meal with turkey. This we are orecchiette, which is a typical pasta from South, is handmade, and here I enjoyed creating a sauce with pumpkin. This is a pork meat. Umbria is very famous for pork meat because the first one to do sausages were in Norcia. That's why we have a name, Norcineria. So these are some. But that's very interesting. Dr. Christie, she comes every year with a program that mainly based on the Mediterranean diet. And I don't need to explain you what is the Mediterranean diet, but we all are thankful to Ansel Case for all of his studies. And we know that what really pushed him to start these studies is because he went to South Italy and he noticed that many of the people there were having less of diseases that we know nowadays, like heart problems and things like that. So I started this research, and in Umbria we have a Dr. Adalberta Alberti, which is one of the cohort that searched for the Mediterranean diet. She's a woman, she's more than 80, very alive and enjoyable, that the students have been to Villa Pieve enjoy to meet. But what is the Mediterranean diet? You know that the Mediterranean diet is based on very healthy ingredients, you know, a lot of vegetable, oil of olive, it means that oil of olive is like the main ingredient, and wheat and vegetables and all of that. Not much meat, mainly fish, which was the meal that was mainly used in South Italy. But we know that very important for the Mediterranean diet is the lifestyle. So it's very important to consider the Mediterranean diet as a lifestyle rather than a diet in itself. Traditional culture that values time at the table with friends and family. This is important because in Italy, and probably we are the only country in Europe that stop lunch time. Even, you know, work time is divided, and lunch time there is no way to stay at work. But, you know, I asked myself, where did the Mediterranean diet come from? Because it's true that the Mediterranean diet was studied at the beginning of 20th century, but that habit didn't start at that time. And here you see in Perugia we have a beautiful building, which is the medieval building of St. Peter, which is one of the first Benedictine monasteries, and this dates back to the year 1000. We have a town in Umbria, Norcia, where we have a famous saint, St. Benedict, which is as important as everybody knows St. Francis, but St. Benedict is the first one that started the monastic lifestyle. And speaking of sustainability, he was a great entrepreneur and a genius, because then he said, you know, the way that the monasteries, not only the Benedictine monasteries, but then also the Franciscan and the Dominican, had to repeat this lifestyle life. We have to go back to the Middle Ages, in a time where there was a lot of poverty and very few people had the knowledge of food and medicine. So those monasteries were so important because the monks had to share their time between working in the land, working for the culture, you know, the manuscript, manu, hand. There was the main work activity of these monks as the first library and first kind of universities. They were not called universities, but they were in these monasteries. So whoever, you know, had any kind of problem had to go to these Benedictine monasteries. And with the creation of a new religious life in the monasteries, St. Benedict and St. Francis gave to humanity a new perspective on how to organize their lives through balancing work, study, activity, and contemplation. But it's very interesting to reflect that Western culture versus Eastern culture, sometimes, you know, we think that activity in the Western culture is something different from contemplation versus, you know, in Oriental world, sometimes the two things can be the same. In the time of St. Benedict, activity and contemplation were at once. And it is the complexity of the symbols of the Benedictine and Franciscan tradition that allows us to fully understand the Italian culture and the roots of the medieval life in all of its aspects. My point is that nowadays we are still into that kind of balancing of time and kind of food. Now we are taking you to these beautiful photos that you can see is the medieval garden of Perugia, you know, in the Benedictine monastery of St. Peter. Now is the site of the University of Agricultural Studies. In the Middle Ages, there were 1,000 of monks living there. And this place was very important because it was also the official entrance to the town of Perugia. So it means that whoever had entered had to be checked to see if there was any kind of problem or disease and put in quarantine before entering inside of the town. The role of the monastery was so important also because one of the things the Benedictine has to do, they had to give charity. And because there was a lot of poverty, the people were coming there every Friday, and the monks were giving a bread and a trout to those visitors, as they had their own basins, with the trouts, because they had to eat more fish than meat. And they were growing their orchard, and to the benefit of the community, because there were 1,000 monks to feed. At the same time, also for the large community, there was the town. It's very interesting to reflect on the concept of humility that is integral to the idea of the unity of the individual and the cosmos. Speaking of health, it's very important when you feel ourselves part of the whole. And the word itself, humility, comes from the Latin humus, which means soil, fertilized land. To be humble, then, is to be able to participate deeply in the life of the physical world around us. That was this Benedictine were doing. The medieval garden of St. Peter's Benedictine Monastery in Perugia embodies the cultural incentives that impelled medieval men to tame nature, not only for nutritional purposes, but also for spiritual reasons. In medieval times, there might have been 1,000 monks living in this monastery, all to be fed.
Saint Benedict gave us rules about food, and that extensive research is concerned specifically with the Mediterranean diet. He then extended his observation to all of Europe. However, his specific standards are more or less for the diet of central Italy, and actually he started with beverages, and he recommends the drinking of wine. But this wine must be of a certain strength, and the monks should not drink a lot, una mina, being mindful to only have half a liter a day. Then for all foods, he suggests a considerable amount of meat and fish, but only on certain days. Later, they also permitted the piatti coti, cooked pasta dishes, using flour because the monks cultivated a great deal of wheat on their land. The period of Lent and Advent are special times when the monks have to do penance, and then, in that case, you eat only once each day. And then you must eat a big meal. Lunch would be something like 1 kilo of bread per person, and a small amount again for dinner. And the monks had to conserve supplies to have enough for their evening meal. Saint Benedict wanted the monks to also eat legumes, because lentils, peas, and beans are required for good health, considering their heavy work responsibility. During the period when monks eat, there must also be present the lettore, the reader. In fact, our dining hall is very large, and it is written in big letters, silence, because the monks have to be gathered together and must be able to hear the reading. In 1966, it was the millennium anniversary of the foundation of the monastery, and I gave a surprise to all the guests, amongst which, of course, there were cardinals, bishops, prefects, the mayor, and other important people. Without saying anything to anyone, I went up to the pulpit, which hadn't been used since 1860, and I started singing. I sang the Gospel of the day, and after I read a passage of the Rule of Saint Benedict, and everyone was astonished and surprised, but no one even took a breath. At the end I said, Deo gracias, which basically meant you can finally eat, you can now have lunch.
What you have seen is this garden that has been recreated like it was in the Middle Ages at the Benedictine Monastery of St. Peter. And the guy who was talking, he was the prior of the Benedictine Monastery. He is holding a research on the roots of the Mediterranean diet based on the food that was provided in those monasteries. It's very interesting, you know, how the monastery was organized. Following the Benedictine motto, ora et labora, work and pray, and the concept typically Franciscan of the creation, the monks were dividing their time between working the land, studying, praying, and supporting the entire community around the monastery. That's very important. The Garden of the Soul, so-called, has been recreated at the monastery of St. Peter and perfectly embodies medieval thought and beautifully combines the unity of God and nature, which is the basis of the monastic tradition. You see in the middle there is the olive tree, which represents the tree of light. And in the middle you have like the four fountains that provide food in the earthly paradise, which is honey, wine, water, and milk, the main ingredients. The early life of the monk allows him to improve his skills in deepening his knowledge of the properties of plants. He is the one who organizes the Hortus Sanitatis. The Hortus Sanitatis is the area in the garden for the healing herbs. That was the old pharmacy, as the pharmacy started in these monasteries where chemistry was alchemy. And you can only think of this great figure of the Middle Ages, Hildegard von Bingen, which is one of the first doctors that we know of, that she was a Benedictine, and specifically she was created all these ingredients that nowadays we would call the Nutricea, the new science, healing with food. And this is a part of the garden which is particularly dedicated to the raising of the healing herbs. That was the origin of the medieval pharmacy. Another area in the garden is called Hortus Olerorum, which is the place where fruit trees grow. You have to remember that these monasteries have to be self-sufficient communities to feed the community and help also the people. And so the symbolic representation of the earthly paradise is always at the entrance of the medieval garden. Specifically chosen plants are organized in a space that is also symbolic. So you'll see that the central part is a circular and is divided into 12 sections that all represent the zodiac. At those times, those were the planets that they knew. As soon as the world expanded, it takes the oval shape, where you have the representation of the four elements. In the middle, as we have seen, there is the tree of light. In a concrete manner, the medieval gardens answers those fundamental questions about existence the medieval man was posing himself. That also was the first university, because in these gardens there was all the knowledge you can even think. You know, if you are the area, you know, that referred to mathematics. You know, just think of the Fibonacci series. You know, the Fibonacci that thinks that everything that is in nature you observed, which is this kind of mathematical representation, very close to what we call the golden section. So geometrical and biology, geometry and biology for them was a symbol. They were studying that because it was a part of a divine will. So you can see how religion had an impact also in the growing of knowledge. And this Benedictine had a very main role about that. They were also the first university, because, you know, in the university started with them. They were the first one to have the knowledge. And the only one to have the facultas, because they were very creative also in the way that they were creating knowledge, because they were a researcher. So they had the faculty, in Latin, to decide what was the topic that they have to develop. That's why nowadays you call the professor faculty, and somehow you nowadays still you prepare your syllabus, your curriculum. So you see, the university started like that. It's called like Studium Generales, general studies, indicates that the institution is a place of study open to everyone, with a body of professor called Magistorum, and a body of students called Scholarum, still the words that we use nowadays. The Universitas Magistorum as licentia facultas, to design the complex of subject to be taught. Like nowadays, we are still into that kind of parameters. By the way, this beautiful photo by Francesco Garipoli is a window of 17th century, which is at our country house of the school. When the student gets his licencia, his degree, he can start teaching and become part of the doctores legentes. In their classes, teachers in the Middle Ages were mainly reading and commenting on the classical discipline, lectio, this Latin, which is why we still use the word lesson today. If I had to envision the mission of a university today, I would use the metaphor of the garden, through which we let the student in search of his or her most genuine self. At all the various sciences, mathematics, nutrition, botany, philosophy, etc., they work together harmoniously to help the human being reach the promise of their personal gift, as healthcare is not just what we eat, but how we eat, where it comes from, and especially the sense of community. What we have in Italy is this sense of community, to stop your work and sit at table together with family and friends. That's very important. The idea that you prepare the meal, you go to the grocery shop, but we can go to a lot of farms, still we do that. And then you can prepare all together and think about that. That's something that is health in itself. It's true that vegetarian diet has been studied because of the good nutritional value, but also the med studies, what really particularly worked is the idea that they were in a village where everybody was part of this community, and that really gave that sense of well-being, which is what the meal in the end is about. And then we end with a cappuccino, because whenever I think of it, I think of Prosecco and cappuccino. And now I just said, you select your ingredients, and what are you gonna eat today? Questions?
I looked at your website, and so you've done drawings, paintings, and I'd like to ask you a little bit about the work that you do with sustainability. I know you've got some ceramic pieces. How do you find your partners, and what are some of the decisions that make you choose partners for the sustainability?
Okay, thank you. She made a question because she saw the website Table of Silence, www.tableofsilence.com, which is a sustainable project of art through sustainability, which is based on the idea of the table. In 2005, I have created 100 dishes. I call them sculpture dishes, otherwise people think that you're going to eat on that. They are made with a technique that the Etruscans were already using, which is a technique of mezzo ingobbio. And I realized pouring on the white terracotta, white clay, and creating a kind of iconographic image of the banquet, inviting people to come in. I gave the name the Table of Silence, because a silence is the predisposition for a peaceful dialogue, as in silence start listening. And my project that I started, that I've created a vacuum, a space for the others to express themselves. But not with verbal communication, because when we use words, we can have some problems sometimes, we cannot use the right cultural models. But with the image, with the art, then nobody can get hurt, because it's a way that speaks to the heart of the people more than to the intellect. So I said, if we let the table travel over at least 20 countries, we give everybody the possibility to install the table, as we give the host the possibility to prepare the table. When we are guests, we don't prepare the table, but this is very interesting. In Italy, we are one word,
Ospite, the state for host and guest, means that hospitality is an equalizer. You are the same in the relationship. So thinking of peace, you know, this is like my main interest. I thought if we really let the table go and let the person that gave hospitality to my table express itself, then we have a positive dialogue that starts in silence, and then let the people in the country that my table will visit express themselves, not through word once more, but through images. Well, it happened to my table that had something that we never expect when I started the project, that in 2011, it was the 10th anniversary of the disaster of the Twin Towers that all the Western world saw, and we were shocked. That really is where intolerance can arrive to that cruel point. And we never thought in our Western time we could happen something like that. So my friend Jacqueline Buhisi, we do my work. You know, being an artist and working at the international level, you have a lot of artist friends in different fields. And I also lived in New York when I was much younger. And so Jacqueline Buhisi, she is a grateful choreographer. She is the, she worked with Martha Graham on the last 20 years of the great dancer who made a big change on dance. And she was also her assistant choreographer. She has her own Buhisi Dance Theater. She's one of the greatest choreographer of dance in the world. She was looking for a way to commemorate the victim of September 11. So we were talking, I said, you know, at a certain point, I had already brought the table to Japan, and at a certain point I will bring the table to the United States. And then she envisioned a dance, a ceremonial dance of 100 dancers carrying those dishes. For her, I realized a smaller version of the original one, which are big, for them to carry on their tunic. You can enjoy the video on YouTube, you know, clicking Table of Silence. The beautiful thing is that since then, every year on September 11, we have more than 100 dancers from the best school of New York, Juilliard, Ailey, Buhisi Dance Theater, that they volunteer to perform the Table of Silence. It goes on the first pages of the arts of the New York Times. Wall Street Journal made a wonderful article about that, interviewing the young dancers. And we didn't have any resources when it started. And we had an enterprises, the fashion company that made the tunic. They were designed by a costumist. My friend Pizzeri, where I do the ceramics, he let me redo the ceramics for Buhisi. They were donated to her theater. You know, we find what was necessary at the very last minute was a very fast decision. But since then, every year is repeated. We are always new dancers. Until now, we probably trained more than 500 dancers for the Table of Silence, which is also traveling to Italy. It was invited in Assisi when there was the big gathering of all the religious leaders. It became the symbol of the table as a symbol of peace and communication. Then speaking of sustainability, there are many projects that are related to that. And I did, related to the Table of Silence, a series of dishes that are made in the style of a child. It's called Canticle for a Kid. And I translated the Canticle of the Preachers of St. Francis, the respect for nature. That the first one is My All Kid Have Stars, which is like Laudato Mio Signore for Sister Stars. And that to me is that if we maintain the right of dreaming for children, then it means that when they'll be old, they will be willing to study, they will be willing to progress. The second one is May all kids have son, the respect for life, like the loudest to brother son. And of course, you know, we need to protect them, especially nowadays. And the third one is May all kids have home, which is Mother Earth in the Canticle of the Preachers. I didn't get that. That's the sustainability things that I outsourced, you know, to different things that put together. So it's the enterprise that repeated my ceramic dishes. There is the organization, the Kiwanis International, that sold them, and through that we were able to build 9 schools in the Ivory Coast. And that for me was very important because these schools were just built before the last conflict in the Ivory Coast. And I knew, and I heard that they were like, you know, those schools where these kids could protect themselves in that moment. So that not only gave right to studies, but they gave also protection. So these things are very important to me. So when we go to thank you for picking up these things. But yes, you know, the table is not just the food. When we speak of welfare, especially in those times of war, we have seen what is happening, you know, in Europe and everywhere. It's like we need to be better listener, and for sure the table can be also the place of conflicts, but also the place of peace. That's why I created my Waves of Grace. And I graciously thank you for inviting me here.